Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, Dr. Peter Crate is providing his list, his 10 books that every person must read before they die. Now, you should listen to Dr. Peter Crate because, well, he is a professor of philosophy. He's also just a really down to earth Christian. I can personally tell from watching many of his videos that his heart has been transformed, it has been melted by God. And not only has his heart been melted, but his mind has been renewed. It's been transformed, as the Apostle Paul talks about. And so I think he's just a great person to listen to if you really want to know the books that you should be reading to be the type of person that God would want you to be. And not just that, but to actually grow in virtue, to actually grow and change. So let's watch this clip. He's basically going through 10 books that he thinks that every person must read before they die. And then there's one specific book in here that I guarantee you that you have never read that I read from watching this clip. And it was just an amazing book. And I will explain that at the end. Check this out.
I start with Augustine's Confessions, which I think is the greatest book ever written outside the Bible. If I had to go to a desert island and take only 3 books with me, I think the first one would be How to Build a Boat. Second one would be the Bible, and the third one would probably be the Confessions. But be careful to get the Sheed translation because Augustine is a poet. Augustine's Latin sings, and most of you don't know Latin, and it's very difficult to translate poetry from one language into another and get the sound right. You can get the concepts right, but one language sounds very different than another. Well, Sheed gets the sound right. He translates the fact that Augustine sings rather than just speaks prose. It's a very beautiful translation of a passionate and thoroughly human being who has committed every sin in the book and becomes a great saint. Great saints are usually made out of great sinners. You need passion to be redirected to God. In order to start up a stuck car, you need much more force than to turn a speeding car around 180 degrees. Well, somebody who's running away from God is at least running. And God can more easily make a saint out of a passionate sinner than out of a limp spaghetti noodle. Augustine has what so few people in our society have anymore, namely passion. And once his passion is directed to truth and goodness, he becomes one of the greatest saints of all time. In fact, medieval Europe is made, I think, more by Augustine than by any other single human being, with the possible exception of Socrates. Everybody in this room either would not exist or would be a very, very different person if Augustine had never existed. So read the Confessions. I guarantee it'll ring. What other autobiography? Well, there's a book that's not nearly as famous, and it's not as great, and it's not written by a canonized saint, but it's written by a man of passion and a man of poetry, and a very good man, Sheldon Van Auken, whom I knew personally. A Severe Mercy is an autobiography that begins with a beautiful pre-Christian pagan love story, proceeds to a conversion story. C.S. Lewis was the main agent there, and then concludes with a story about death. Love, faith, and death are 3 of the most important things in life, and this is a beautiful story. I just, a few minutes ago, asked 2 other people whether they read the book. They both said yes, and my first question was, did you weep? And they both said yes. I have asked 43 people now, have you read the book? 42 of them have wept. So if you read that book, bring a couple of handkerchiefs, especially for the death scene. Novels, second category. Notice that I didn't include sociology or psychology. I think the best way to understand human feelings and behavior, whether individual or social, is by reading novels. They're concrete rather than abstract. They're practical rather than theoretical. To read a novel is to make a lot of friends, because a good novelist has to identify with all of his characters. And to do that, they have to be real. And the characters drive a novel. You meet them, you understand them, you live inside their flesh for a little while. That's especially true of great novelists, and probably the greatest one is Dostoevsky. And my candidate for the greatest novel ever written is The Brothers Karamazov. There's everything in there. He stretches you. If you don't want to be stretched, if you want to be patted on the head and feel comfortable, don't read Dostoevsky. He's a volcano. He'll put you in touch with two people that you didn't dream existed. One of them is the Satan in you, and the other is the Christ in you. And his characters, sometimes a single character, are living sometimes in heaven, sometimes in hell. They're all weird. But that doesn't mean we can't identify them with them, because we're weird. We just suppress it. So that's all I have to say about the book. It's about just everything. It's, of course, a novel, and therefore it's about human interaction, and it's about love and hate, and death and life, and faith and doubt, and despair and hope, and it's also a great detective story. A second choice, I'm not saying that these are the two greatest novels ever written, but my second choice, less universally known, is the book that C.S. Lewis thought was the best one he ever wrote, and I totally agree with him. Till We Have Faces is a book that's laid in pagan pre-Christian Greece, and it's about the problem of evil, and it's about sin and what to do about it and what God does about it. In other words, it's about the same thing as Augustine's Confessions and The Brothers Karamazov, but it's beautifully written, and everyone I have ever talked to who has read that book has read it a second time. And 100% of the people who read it a second time said, the first time was good, but the second time was twice as good. It's one of these books that has layers in it. Each layer makes sense. You don't have to plow through a bad layer the first time. Just as a story, it makes sense. But then when you reread it, you see, like an onion, all sorts of layers. I've read it at least 12 times. I get something out of it that's new each time. I'm going to put a lot of C.S. Lewis in here. He's my favorite modern author. In fact, 6 of these 26 books are from C.S. Lewis, 4 by G.K. Chesterton. Third category, plays. My favorite movie of all time is A Man for All Seasons. Robert Bolt was the playwright who wrote the play, and the movie is based on and faithful to the play. And usually when you make a movie out of a play or a novel, the movie messes it up because movie makers are very arrogant and they want to add and change the author. But Bolt, who was supervising the movie, didn't do that. This is totally faithful to the play. And everything from the music to the sets to the characters fits the play. So yeah, read the play, but definitely see the movie. By the way, I don't classify The Passion of the Christ as a movie. I classify it as a liturgy. It's a time machine. It takes you back 2,000 years. It's a miracle. I assume you've all seen it. So that's on a category of its own. But next to that, I think A Man for All Seasons is the greatest movie of all time, and the play is one of the best of all time. My other play, Thornton Wilder's Our Town, unfortunately is taught to the only people in America who shouldn't read the play, high school students, adolescents. Because an adolescent, quite rightly, is a rebel, and they rebel against the establishment and ordinary people and their parents and their family. And this is about parenting and about families and about ordinary people. So it seems to most high school students very familiar and quite kind of hokey and backwoodsy and ordinary and not spectacular. and comforting. It's exactly the opposite. It's terrifying. When hard-nosed Hollywood elites first saw the play, they broke down and wept, perhaps for the only time in their lives. It's a play that is so popular that tonight, somewhere in the world, it is being put on some stage. There's no other play that's that popular. It's popular in hundreds of translations, in hundreds of languages, as well as in America. The key to its success, I think, is that this ordinary life is looked at from the viewpoint of the dead. The main characters die, but instead of looking at death from the viewpoint of life, which we usually do, you also get to look at life from the viewpoint of death. And that's jolting. It's beautiful. It's another tearjerker. By the way, I think that's a pretty good indication that the writer gets an A. Tears. That's an impossible thing to force. I command you to cry, to weep. That's ridiculous. Can't be done. How can I elicit tears? Well, only in two ways. By doing something very bad, like giving you a good kick, or by doing something very good, by presenting something so good or so beautiful that you weep. I think that the greatest call for an artist, the greatest job description for any artist, especially artists in words, is to break the human heart. Because no heart can possibly be a whole heart unless it's first been broken. Just as nothing can rise from the dead unless it first dies. So our ordinary heart has to be broken before it can be complete. And great works of art do that. Every one of the 6 books that I've mentioned before does that. And so does The Lord of the Rings, which 4 different polls of readers, ordinary readers, picked as the greatest book of the 20th century. The only class of people that does not believe that The Lord of the Rings is the greatest book of the 20th century are literary critics. Which doesn't say anything about The Lord of the Rings, but it says a lot about the critics, that they are a bunch of overstuffed, proud, arrogant, out of touch elitists. But it is certainly the greatest book of the century. There's no question about it. This is another book that I've read at least a dozen times. I have to read it every couple of years. Every couple of years I get a little antsy and something's missing. What's missing? Oh, I haven't read The Lord of the Rings for a couple of years. The movie's good. If you've not read the book but have seen the movie, I'm sorry, you should have read the book first. And the movie might spoil your reading of the book because instead of your own imagination, you might use Peter Jackson's imagination, which is very good. I mean, the acting is good, and the costumes are perfect, and the special effects are wonderful, the battle scenes are great, the settings are terrific, but he doesn't understand Tolkien. He doesn't understand heroism. Every one of the basic characters in his movie is cut down to ordinary size, but in Tolkien they're not. So the book is far better than the movie. It's a long book, but Tolkien himself said that he wept and keeps weeping when he rereads his manuscript at 2 points. I was very pleased to read that after I had finished The Lord of the Rings a couple of times, then read Tolkien's letters, which are very good, by the way. And I was pleased to read that those were the same 2 passages that I wept at. But there was a third weeping. When you come to the end. The end. Oh my goodness. How can I possibly come to the end of this? Tolkien said, I don't usually read my own critics because we have different standards, but I do accept one criticism of The Lord of the Rings, which is about 1,500 pages long, namely, it's much too short. When you close this epic fantasy and turn your head from the book to your refrigerator or your garbage can, you don't get the impression that you're moving from a less real world to a more real world. Just the opposite. Somehow, it's much more difficult to believe in your garbage can than to believe in Frodo and Bilbo and the other characters in Lord of the Rings. And that's sort of true also with C.S. Lewis's great achievement in the Chronicles of Narnia. I'm not sure whether Lewis will be known and recognized as great 500 years from now. I think he will. But I'm almost certain that the Chronicles of Narnia will. Because they are not only the best children's books ever written, they're children's books which can be enjoyed and digested and appreciated by adults just as much as children. And Lewis did a miracle. No other writer in the history of the world ever did anything even close to what C.S. Lewis did. In the Chronicles of Narnia, the most interesting character there is Jesus Christ. Of course, he's Aslan. But there are hundreds of books by Christians, most of them Protestant fundamentalists, who try to write fictional books about Jesus. They're all embarrassingly bad. Don't read any of them. It's impossible to take him seriously. The Christ of the Gospels is so big and so impossible to come up to and to imitate and to equal that you can't invent a character like that. One of my strongest arguments for the reality of Christ, the Church's Christ, the true Christ, is no human being could possibly imagine that story. Certainly, 12 bumbling Galilean fishermen couldn't. Where did that story come from, if not from reality? You can't imagine that. And that's why you can't write more stories about Christ, more fiction about Christ. Lewis did. When you read the Chronicles of Narnia and you meet Aslan, what happens? Something happens in your heart, in your spirit, which is unique. He somehow enables you to spontaneously feel towards Aslan the same complex and unique emotion that people who met Jesus in the Gospels felt when they first met him. Aslan is not comfortable. He's a lion. He's terrifying, but he's good. So good that in him is all our hope. But usually we think of things that are terrible and fearful as bad, and usually we think of things that are good as comforting and satisfying. No, not Aslan. Nope. He's just like Christ. How did Lewis do it? Well, it's fantasy. So he creeps past the watchful dragons of familiarity. Narnia is another world. You don't expect Jesus to be a lion. And duty. You feel a duty to feel certain ways towards the Christ of the Gospels, and duty paralyzes spontaneity. Lewis received quite a few letters from children saying, I loved your Chronicles of Narnia, but I feel guilty because I think I love Aslan more than I love Jesus. And Lewis said, don't feel guilty, Aslan is Jesus. It's a masterpiece, all 7 of them. Category 5, supernatural fantasy, includes another masterpiece by Lewis. What Lewis did in The Great Divorce is basically what Dante did in the Divine Comedy, but it's much shorter, it's much clearer, it transcends the culture. 500 years from now, you won't have to do a lot of historical research to find out what politicians Lewis is satirizing, as you do for Dante in the Divine Comedy. I know the Divine Comedy is a great book, but it's not easily accessible on first reading. The Great Divorce is. Same theme. Trip from hell to heaven. And what's great about the Divine Comedy is you can identify with all those characters, the saints and the sinners. It's universally human. You do the same thing in The Great Divorce. The plot is basically a busload of travelers from hell is allowed to visit heaven, the outskirts of heaven, and choose to either stay there or go back to hell. All but one choose to go back to hell. It's a great satire. It's funny as well as terribly serious. And it shows you yourself and your own follies. It's not really speculation about the next world. That's fantasy. What do we know about the next world? Very little. The best description of it in the Bible is, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has it entered into the heart of man the things that God has prepared for those who love him. So the point is not speculation about what you're going to meet after death. The point is what you're doing right now. And just as Thornton Wilder turns things around and looks at life from the viewpoint of death, so Lewis turns things around and looks at this world from the viewpoint of the next. I've seen this performed as a play 4 times in 4 different cities by 4 different sets of players for 4 very different audiences. Every single time I heard how effective the play was. As a college professor, I'm very sensitive to noise in the audience. And I know when I'm boring people, papers are shuffling and feet are moving and they can't wait to get out of the classroom. Ordinarily, it's just a little bit of that noise, and that's ordinary level. When I say something really interesting, the noise stops, like now. But maybe once a year, maybe less than that, maybe once every 2 or 3 years, I'll say something so arresting that they'll not only stop moving, they'll stop breathing. Literally. Stop breathing for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's easy to stop breathing for 5 seconds, but you don't usually do it. And I can hear the difference. And every single time I've seen this play perform, I've heard the audience stop breathing a couple times. It's an amazing book. The other supernatural fantasy by Lewis is the Screwtape Letters, which also turns things upside down because it's a series, probably you know this, even if you haven't read it, a series of letters from a senior devil to a junior devil about how to tempt humankind, that is us. I seriously believe that the Screwtape Letters will be recognized as one of the great spiritual classics in Christian literature for the next thousands of years. The practical advice about faith and unfaith, and hope and despair, and charity and egotism, and the clever ways that Satan enables us to deceive ourselves. You learn an immense amount of practical religious wisdom in the Screwtape Letters, and it's funny. The funny and the serious aren't necessarily opposite. Lewis was once asked the question, do you think that heaven will be funny or serious? And he said, that question is not serious, it's funny.
All right. So in the beginning, I mentioned that there was one of these books that Dr. Peter Kraft mentioned that I think you should really read. Now, lots of these books I have personally read, or at least I have dabbled in. Um, Mainly the C.S. Lewis books that he cites here. I have dabbled in all of them. I have his library, and I've read a lot of. So for example, The Great Divorce I've dabbled in. Till We Have Faces I've dabbled in. The Chronicles of Narnia I've read all the way through and listened to. Great books, and I would agree with Dr. Peter Kraft here. The one that Dr. Peter Cray specifically mentioned that I had to get, and I actually ended up reading in its entirety, and it was just an amazing book, was A Severe Mercy. I did, in fact, cry reading it. And I think the reason why he says that so many people cry while reading it is just the way that it's kind of laid out. It is an autobiography, much in the same way that St. Augustine's Confession is an autobiography. And it's just this constant reflection upon his journey and all the places that God was leading him, and just kind of the tragedy. It was just a series of unfortunate events that led to him questioning his faith, led to him questioning God. And it's precisely in that moment that C.S. Lewis provides such a profound insight when he says, perhaps God is providing you a severe mercy, hence the title of the book. And I don't want to spoil too much. I'll just talk about the principle. The principle is basically sometimes there's things in our lives that God provides to us that are necessary for us, even though they might be severe, because God is providing his mercy. God knows we need it. And if we didn't have it, we wouldn't remain connected to him. And therefore, God provides these trials, these temptations, these struggles, these dire consequences, even because why? Because they're severe, yes, but also because they are a mercy that leads us back to him. It's a spiritual principle that few walk through. I think many people give up the faith before they walk through a severe mercy. But if we see the trials, if we see the sufferings that we endure, particularly and specifically as a mercy, even though they are severe, it's amazing what comes out on the other side. And that is precisely what C.S. Lewis was saying to um, this colleague and this friend of his. Check out that book. It was a really really good book. It opens up with him kind of at his childhood home, reminiscing and reflecting upon all that he has lived and experienced. It's a very imaginative book, as books often are. That sounds probably something very stupid and redundant, but it really does kind of grab you and throws you into his world, and you feel for the guy. Oh my goodness, yeah. All right, so check out these books. I will leave a link to the video below, which I believe has an entire link to all of the books. And yeah, see you in the next one. Remember that Christianity is Christ. Without him, there is no Christianity. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.